Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Do Hongyu. Coming up in this edition, a 5-magnitude earthquake has jolted the epicenter of last week's 6.8 magnitude earthquake in southwest China. Israel and Hamas are appearing to move closer to a potential ceasefire in Gaza. And TikTok has made a final attempt to stop it from being effectively banned in the United States. We begin in Asia. A 6.9 magnitude earthquake has hit southwest Japan. The quake struck the Kyushu region, causing small tsunamis without major damage. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory for Miyazaki and Kochi prefectures, urging people to stay away from the waterfront. No big waves were reported, and there has been little impact on shipping or land traffic. Rebecca Bunden has more from Tokyo.
Tsunami warnings were issued in Japan's Miyazaki and Kochi provinces following the earthquake which took place on Monday night local time in the Miyazaki prefecture. That means that waves of up to 1 meter in height could be expected. Authorities are warning people in the area not to enter the sea or go too near to the coast until the advisory is lifted. Earthquakes, which are normally small, are very common in Japan. Last year on New Year's Day, a massive 7.6 magnitude earthquake and several smaller earthquakes hit the Noto Peninsula in Japan, killing more than 500 people and destroying tens of thousands of homes. That area has yet to fully recover from the disaster, and authorities are monitoring the situation very closely following Monday's earthquake.
That was Rebecca Bunden reporting. A 5-magnitude earthquake has jolted the epicenter of last week's deadly 6.8 magnitude earthquake in southwest China. It's one of the strongest aftershocks since the quake struck Dingzhi County in the Xizang Autonomous Region on January 7th. Another one of 4.9 magnitude also occurred on the same day. No casualties have been reported so far, and further investigation is underway. The China Earthquake Network Center has detected over 3,600 aftershocks since January 7th, mostly below 3 magnitude. Disaster management teams have been conducting safety checks. Zhao Chenchen has more from Laze County, which was also affected by the aftershocks on Monday.
Laze County had experienced one of the strongest aftershocks since the earthquake, according to local residents. 2 consecutive ones, actually, one measuring at 4.9 and the other at 5.0. Our reporters at the front line in Laze County also felt strong shakes of the aftershocks, and there were continuing aftershocks throughout the night. And the aftershock waves also hit here in Laze County. We happened to be outside last night when the aftershock happened, and we saw people rushing out in a little bit of panic. But later on, we felt fine since we can rely on the alarm systems on our smartphones for further alarms. Now, local authorities have carried out immediate inspections and check-ins on the local residents of the affected villages. And so far, fortunately, no injuries have been reported.
That was Zhao Chenchen reporting. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayaka is in China for a state visit. He will hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is his first visit to China since he took office as the Sri Lankan president. Zhao Yunfei has more.
Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayaka landed here at Beijing Capital International Airport, his first visit to China since taking office last September. President Xi Jinping is expected to hold talks with President Dissanayaka. The Sri Lankan leader will also meet with Premier Li Qiang as well as chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Zhao Leji. China and Sri Lanka have been friendly neighbors since the two countries established diplomatic ties back in 1957. Beijing says the relationship has withstood the test of a changing international landscape and that both sides maintain sound and steady development while setting a good example for friendly coexistence and mutually beneficial cooperation between countries of different sizes. Strategically located in the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka has emerged as a vital partner in the Belt and Road Initiative, which has already delivered concrete results to the nation. China says it considers President Dissanayaka's visit as an opportunity to deepen mutual trust while expanding high-quality Belt and Road cooperation along with practical projects across various sectors.
That was Zhao Yinfei reporting. Turning to North America, wildfires have been ravaging Los Angeles for a week. Additional water tankers and scores of firefighters have arrived in the area ahead of strong winds forecast to return on Tuesday. Authorities say the fires have killed 24 people and destroyed thousands of homes. The blazes have also forced many residents to abandon their homes and businesses. Some evacuees have expressed disappointment over the government's lack of preparedness for the disaster. Eddie's Tiansang visited Altadena, ground zero of the Eaton fire, to find out more.
We're in Altadena. This is a city northeast of Los Angeles, and it's essentially ground zero for the Eaton fire. Remember, that's the second biggest fire after the Palisades fire. Those are among about 6 fires the county of Los Angeles has been facing since earlier this week. And here we are at the heart of a residential neighborhood. This entire block of homes have been destroyed. This appears to be the living room of this house, where the only thing standing right now is the fireplace. Everything else has been leveled. It's a very sad, traumatic scene, obviously. And just earlier, we had a chance to speak to one of the families just behind this house. They were obviously traumatized. They had 2 children. They are now trying to send out of state to other relatives. And as they deal with this imminent situation here, the father was worried about the insurance. They are now in some kind of temporary housing. They're not sure how much the payout will be from the insurance. And the mother was tearing up, thinking, she'd been wearing the same clothes for the past 2 days because they only had enough time to take the most important documents. And she said that they lost everything else they owned in that house. And the reason why these streets are so quiet right now is because not only we're not yet out of the woods, because the fire is actually not too far away from here. It seems calm for now, but we do expect windy conditions in the coming days. So everybody is still on high alert for those fast-moving flames. And the second reason is with towns like this looking like a ghost town, there has been increased incidents of lootings in the city. So now the city of LA is also imposing a curfew in the dark hours to prevent some of those crimes, but also it will facilitate the work that the fire crews are doing on the ground. In the meantime, we do know that more evacuations are still taking place as this fire continues to move to different parts of the city.
That was Eddie Tiansang reporting. Staying in the U.S., outgoing President Joe Biden says his country is stronger and its allies are intact. He made the remarks in his final foreign policy speech at the State Department a week before he hands over the presidency to Donald Trump. Nathan King has more from Washington, D.C.
4 years ago, when Joe Biden came into office, he probably had the most foreign policy experience of any president in modern history. He was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for decades, 8 years as vice president, and he basically leaves by defending his foreign policy, saying Biden has had a strong defense, a fierce competition is underway, and America is winning that competition. His sources of national power far stronger than they were when he took office. He says alliances are stronger than they've ever been, that NATO are paying more than they ever have done, trilateral ties in Asia between Japan, Republic of Korea, US, very strong. He mentioned the Philippines, AUKUS, that controversial submarine, nuclear submarine deal between Australia, the UK and the US. He says he's connecting Atlantic and Pacific allies as only as America can do. He mentioned the Quad. He said Iran was weakened, Russia was weakened, and that the US had a better strategic position with China than ever before. Let's listen to his defense.
Compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen.
But as you know, the reality is a lot different. Not a lot of mention on the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, which of course led to a rapid resurgence of the Taliban after 20 years of war, hundreds of billions, thousands of US and countless thousands of Afghan lives lost. Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to rumble on after tens of billions of dollars in weapons supplies. Russia very much on the front foot still. And as you know, the incoming administration support for Kiev is in question. And remember, Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said the Middle East had not been more stable in a decade. Just a few weeks before Hamas attacked Israel on October 2023, killing over 1,200 Israelis and led to a blood and grinding war that continues to this day and has claimed nearly 50,000 Palestinian lives officially. The war with Hezbollah that spilled over, the collapse of the Assad government while welcoming Western capitals is essentially a victory of an Islamic government formerly tied to al-Qaeda. Now the question now, as Biden hands over to Trump 2.0, is how much of the rhetoric we've been hearing out of President-elect Trump will be reality. Is it negotiating stances or positioning? Well, we'll see on the other side of January 20th. We can tell you that Biden's foreign policy chops will be definitely questioned in the next few years and for decades to come.
That was Nathan King reporting. TikTok has made a final attempt to stop it from being effectively banned in the United States. The Supreme Court has heard arguments over whether to uphold or overturn a law that will ban the social media app on Sunday. Owen Fairclough has more.
It's TikTok's last stand in the US. The Supreme Court on Friday hearing an appeal against a law that will force it to either divest its US operations by January the 19th or wind them down. The outgoing Biden administration thinks TikTok is a national security threat, claiming it could hand over US user data to be manipulated by Chinese authorities. But Beijing says the US is abusing national security to stop fair competition. And during the hearing, some justices were skeptical of the national security argument, while raising concerns about the implications for free speech of shutting down a social media platform. TikTok has repeatedly insisted it protects user data. And supporters say US authorities are both fear-mongering and violating a constitutional right to free speech. They include incoming President Donald Trump, who takes office the day after the ban would take place, and even filed a legal brief to support keeping TikTok. TikTok has argued that legal and logistical issues would prevent it from divesting from its parent company ByteDance, but has offered the US a compromise that would effectively switch the app off in the face of any political pressure.
That was Owen Fairclough reporting. Moving on to the Middle East, Israel and Hamas are appearing to move closer to a potential ceasefire in Gaza. The two sides have received a final draft of a truce deal to end the conflict, which will involve the release of hostages held for over 15 months. Negotiators are meeting in Doha, seeking to finalize the plan's details. Jonathan Rijev has more from Tel Aviv.
There was a report earlier in the day that a final draft was given both to Israel and Hamas for authorization. Initially, there was some kind of a denial from Israel, but when the Israeli government wants to clearly deny something, it knows how to do it in a much stronger way. It doesn't seem to be the case this time. As far as any official comment, the only comment was the one coming from Foreign Minister Israel Katz, who just ahead of a meeting with his Danish counterpart who was visiting Israel. Saar said that Israel has gone a long way to facilitate a deal, and that a deal may be closed, and now Israel is waiting for the answers from Hamas. What we are hearing in quite a lot is the voice of those who oppose the deal. One of those, perhaps the most vocal one, is Finance Minister and head of the religious Zionism party in parliament, Bezalel Smotrich, who described this agreement as a catastrophe. Why so? Smotrich is saying that all of the blood that was shed and all of the military achievements were basically in vain, because the deal includes a withdrawal of Israeli forces, and that would allow Hamas to regroup and rearm, and in a year or two Israel will find itself facing the same enemy that it did in previous stages of the war. And not only that, according to Smotrich, there is a difference between blood and blood, as he defines it, meaning that some of the hostages will come back to Israel, but others will remain in Gaza. who knows for how long. Of course, the families are very angry at this protest, at this comment. Not all the families, it has to be said. Some families actually support this call, saying that all of the hostages should be brought together at the same time. No difference, no distinction should be made. But according to what has been reported, there will be different stages. The first stage will include 33, maybe 34 hostages that will return to Israel. The major question is how many of those 33 or 34 are alive. That is something that is undetermined at this time. And this number of living and dead hostages, of course, will also determine the number of Palestinian prisoners that will be released. As more living hostages will come, the number of Palestinian prisoners released will, of course, be higher.
That was Jonathan Rijev reporting. Israel continues to attack Gaza, though there has been push for a ceasefire. A new wave of Israeli airstrikes has killed dozens of Palestinians. Rami Al-Magari has more from Gaza.
Over the past 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, many people have been killed in different and separate airstrikes by the Israeli army and on different parts of the Gaza Strip, including the most notable were in the Gaza city itself, where a number of neighborhoods have been hit by the Israeli airstrikes, including homes and people inside their homes, shelter schools in Gaza City. Also, there have been strikes on the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, particularly in Jabalia refugee camp in Jabalia town. Actually, two separate incidents left about 4 people killed and many others injured. The total of those killed over the past 48 hours is dozens actually, and dozens of others have been injured because of these strikes that continue unabated. In other parts, like Nusayrat refugee camp, there was detonation of some buildings. In Liberation refugee camp in central Gaza Strip, there was detonation of buildings. Also, let's back to Beit Hanun. There have been reports about large explosions in the Beit Hanun area, where there was a sort of a difficult incident in this northern Gaza town, where 4 Israeli soldiers were killed. So the situation continues unabated on both sides, on the political side, on the field side. And actually, let us note here that there have been some little fire rockets from Gaza into nearby Israeli towns, which through which or after which the Israeli army ordered the population of a large neighborhood in the Nusayrat refugee camp to evacuate. As I said, the people here are just hoping there will be some sort of a breakthrough that would end their suffering, especially these days, some kind of hope by means of the goods that entered the Gaza Strip. Number of goods have entered and the prices are getting less than before. So this is a glimpse of hope for the Palestinians in Gaza that this situation will change very soon in the very near future.
That was Rami Al-Magari reporting. Elsewhere in the Middle East, the European Union says it's willing to lift sanctions on Syria. Western and Arab diplomats reviewed the decision in a meeting on the weekend. Adola Mahuri has more from Cairo.
Saudi Arabia hosted the first international meeting that brought Arab and Western diplomats together with members of the new Syrian caretaker government. The meeting aimed at discussing lifting the sanctions imposed on Syria since the 2011 uprising. The Saudi kingdom warned that the continuation of the sanctions will hinder Syria's aspirations for development. EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas said that Europe will move forward with lifting the sanctions if they see Syria moving in, quote, the right track. Last month, militant groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known as HTS, ousted President Bashar al-Assad, ending a 13-year-long conflict between them. Some of these groups are affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Many countries have designated the two as terrorist organizations. Arab and Western diplomats stressed that Syria's state institutions must be preserved and that an inclusive governance system gets established. Europe insists that women be included and radicalism avoided in this new Syrian regime. Last week, Washington issued a 6-month exemption to some of its sanctions on Syria aimed at accelerating humanitarian relief. On January 27, European ministers will be meeting to discuss doing the same. Both, however, insist that sanctions on Assad's allies will remain in place.
That was Adola Mohuri reporting. Before we go, here's a recap of today's top stories. A 5-magnitude earthquake has jolted the epicenter of last week's 6.8 magnitude earthquake in southwest China. Israel and Hamas are appearing to move closer to a potential ceasefire in Gaza. And TikTok has made a final attempt to stop it from being effectively banned in the United States. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports, and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Do Hongyu. Thank you for listening.